Welcome to the Learning Can't Wait podcast, a Full Mind production. At Full Mind, our vision is to ensure every child has access to an exceptional education. Each episode, we will be joined by pathfinders within and around the education space who are bringing about transformational change on behalf of deserving students. I am your host, Haley Spierabauer. Season 7 was our longest season to date, and simply we could not cut off the episodes because there were so many great interviews that occurred. It started out with Michael Horn in the episode entitled Job Moves, where Michael Horn came to talk about his new book, and we gave him a way to think about using job moves in schools to help students with their future-ready and career pathways. And the episode was a great one, and it really kicked off the season with a bang. We moved on to our next episode with Dr. Christina Dukes-Brown, talking about out of school time. Some of the most important time in a student's life are those hours that are not at school. How do we make sure those hours are filled with meaningful, engaging activities? Episode 3, move forward with Dan Fitzpatrick, the international AI expert. Creative Destruction with the AI Educator was the title of the episode, and he was coming fresh off of an international tour talking to schools and leaders and companies about the use of AI and how AI is going to change the future of education. The next episode was entitled, What is Normal with Evan Abramson. There is such a joy in seeing how educators like Evan approach education for all learners and really thinking about what does personalization look like for our most vulnerable learners and how can we reach them in the same ways with more creativity than we reach all of our other students. The next episode was entitled College Access Finance Edition. It was with Gail Demota from the Education Finance Council. We did a lot of learning about college access and the different ways EFC is helping students in high school to access college through their nonprofit organizations. The next episode was called The Rise of Esports, and we had Chris Aviles and Andrew Abramson on this episode talking all about what esports is, why students are so engaged with it, and why schools should be too. Episode 7 with Isabel Sue, How Love to Learn. It was an incredible episode in which Isabel talked about her new book, talked about how early education should look, sound, and feel, and it was a great listen if you missed it. Episode 8 with Julia Fallon, the modernization of schools. One thing about Julia is she's not afraid to speak her mind. And we loved this episode because it really brought us into what school superintendents are thinking about today and how education and technology can merge to make an incredible pathway for students. In episode 9, we had Bridget Johnson in the episode entitled The Power of Deans. So often you think of the dean as the person you never want to talk to and never want to see, and Bridget Johnson is working to combat that thought. Episode 10 with Rob Schwartz was called The Avengers of Education. Who's teaching the superintendents and the principals and helping them get the professional development they need to lead school communities? We tackle that in that episode. Episode 11 with Richard Carranza entitled Technology is Equity. The well-known former head of schools in New York City and Houston and San Francisco came to our episode to talk about his work at IXL and how we can think about technology as being the great bridge between students all over the United States. Kate Everly Walker joined us for Hybrid Services Total Reach, episode 12 from Presence. We are so excited we were able to have time with Kate. She is an absolute visionary, and talking to her about a space I know well from my work at Full Mind, talking about virtual learning and how that can really bridge a school's gaps, especially in rural communities, was extremely meaningful for me. Malvika Bhagwat, Impact Investing and Ed Tech, the first of so many things in her life. Episode 13 was a great look at how VCs, venture capital firms, are thinking about impact and ed tech tools that they invest in. Louise Bagelman came on from StoryShares talking about differentiation, personalization, and texts that make meaning for students. It was so great meeting her after seeing her at the Milken Prize a couple years ago, which she had won, and seeing that tool and then getting a chance to interview her 2 years later and seeing how far the tool has come. Episode 15 with Peter Rellin, Math help at community college. Chat GPT, you've heard of that, I'm sure, but have you heard of Math GPT? Peter came on to talk about the tool, which was incubated in his incubator, and what it's doing to help kids overcome some of the obstacles to community college. Rita Ferrandino came on to understand the funding climate. It was the kickoff to our funding mini-series. She gave a lot of information, helped dispel a lot of misconceptions, and as always, was just a pleasure to talk to. The next episode in that mini-series was with PJ Capozzi, a repeat offender on the Learning Can't Wait podcast, called The Funding Formula. He is the superintendent of not one, but 2 districts. Yes, you heard it right. And he came to talk about how he is approaching the current federal uncertainty in his districts, and really spoke to the unique nature of Illinois schools and how property taxes impact the school funding formula. The next episode was with Jody Buning, E-Rate for All. If you haven't heard of E-Rate, this is a great episode to listen to. E-Rate is the fiber that connects all the schools in America. It provides extra funding for rural communities to ensure they can stay connected. And truly, many of the guests that come on the Learning Can't Wait podcast would never be able to do what they do without E-Rate. The final episode of that mini-series was with Jeff Livingston. It was entitled The Funding Mandate, Act Now. It was a powerful episode. In fact, when I went to ASU GSV just a couple weeks ago, that episode had just dropped and multiple people came up to me and said, wow, that was incredible. Jeff tells his personal story as well as shares why this is so important to him, why we have to act now. We have to rise up and protest what's happening at the federal government level. And these opinions were beautifully conveyed and I know resonated with many. The next episode was with Episode 20 with Mary Jo Fairhead, Thinking Outside the Box. Mary Jo was an incredibly powerful speaker who brought her real life experiences founding a school on the reservation where she grew up to life, why education needs to be different in her mind and how she's created that example and how it's working for the kids in her community. Episode 21 was Open Source for All with Scott Anderberg of Moodle. It was so great to talk to Scott, recently installed as the CEO of Moodle, talking about what has been created thus far and what the future of Moodle is and how they're using LMSs to connect the world and give people opportunities for learning and enhancing equity. Episode 22 was with Brian Hassel and Kendall King of Public Impact, talking about opportunity culture and maximizing impact. When there are staffing shortages, how can we think about the school staffing model currently? What innovations can we apply? And that is the answer to the opportunity culture question. Episode 23 with Jen Garrison, she was talking about balancing leadership, motherhood, and self. But more than that, she was talking about how she approaches building an incredible school culture and making an environment where all kids can learn and we really think about learners' needs. And finally, last but not least, the Shannon Cox of Montgomery County ESC coming on to talk in episode 24 about doing school differently, innovation, equity, and the power of belief. Shannon is a force. And if you've ever met her in person, you'll know why this episode was so incredible. But if you haven't, I highly recommend a listen. And with that, we are wrapped on season 7 and launching quickly into season 8 with some incredible guests. I can't wait for you to hear that season, but you still have time if you haven't listened to any of these incredible episodes to listen now.
Thanks for listening to the Learning Can't Wait podcast. If you like what you heard, please rate, review, and share this episode. Be the first to know when we have a new episode by subscribing wherever you listen to podcasts. If you'd like to be a guest on the show or have a suggestion for an episode, email us at podcast@fullmindlearning.com.